This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. A lot of things happening in the news, a lot of things happening with Freedom Watch. We just don't report the news. I make the news. That's our lead-in. That's a fact. Now, let's talk about China, because people are getting very angry, not just with regard to the stay-at-home imprisonment orders of state governors. And there's going to be violence, as predicted by Rush Limbaugh. He's accurate. People are fed up with being kept in their houses, told what to do, to have their constitutional rights violated. But on top of that, people are, I think, starting to really heat up and get really angry, even more than they were, with regard to the communist Chinese. The coronavirus was leaked either intentionally or accidentally from a lab in Wuhan, China. But we also know that a strain of that virus was most likely given to China by Dr. Fauci of the National Institute of Health when he authorized under the Obama administration, with Obama's approval, a $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan Chinese lab to conduct research on this virus. So it's clear that what the Chinese did is that they manufactured that virus. They manipulated it. They made it lighter than air so it would spread quickly. They injected HIV into it, many experts have said, because they've analyzed the aspect of it, the molecular content of it and its contents. And they obviously did that to create a bioweapon. Now, all countries do that. We do that. We did that with anthrax. It's illegal, but they do it under the table, the intelligence agencies and everybody else. And China let this thing get out by whatever means, and it's destroying the world. And I have to say, as the economy continues to sink, and there are many predictions that it's going to get much worse, the aftershock of being shut down for several months with many more to come. For instance, in Los Angeles, they're not going to open up at best until the end of July. New York City, same thing. They have very partial opening, but not really very much. People's loved ones are dying, elderly. About 50% of the people that have died are parents and grandparents of people. Is that the anger towards China is mounting, and the president can no longer stay silent. It's not enough to say it's a Chinese virus. It's not enough to say we will hold China accountable. Well, say how you're going to hold China accountable. Just don't say that, because people don't believe politicians anymore. And the president has become a politician. Let's face it. He admits that, and however well-intentioned he is, fact is that the Republican establishment and others may try to checkmate him on anything that he does with regard to China. And that underscores the importance of what I am doing, what you are doing at Freedom Watch, with our class action lawsuit against the communist Chinese for over $20 trillion in damage that they've caused to this country in terms of our health, in terms of our welfare, in terms of our loss of jobs, our loss of business, and everything else. Emotional distress. People are committing suicide. That's how upset they are. And they need to be held accountable. And we're doing it at Freedom Watch. Now, you have a bunch of attorney generals say, we're studying the issue. You know what? Go study the issue in your cave, because nothing's going to happen there either. Studying the issue, we know what the issue is. China has no immunity, because as a bioweapon, which it undoubtedly is, and we have at least 4 experts that will testify to that, in our case in Texas, in our case in Jerusalem, Israel, The Hague at the International Criminal Court, where we filed a criminal complaint to have the Chinese leadership, including the panda bear, President Xi. He looks like a cute little panda bear, but boy, he is evil with the rest of the Chinese Politburo. We'll have them thrown in prison because the Europeans are angry. This time they're actually going to be on our side, and they'll actually do something. I firmly believe. And many of the judges on the International Criminal Court are European. Africa's been hit. They're from Africa. They're from Asia. They're from South America. Everybody's been affected. I get calls from all over the world. But the president needs to speak out, and he needs to say exactly what he's going to do. And he needs to instruct his worthless Attorney General, Bill Barr, to support Freedom Watch's class actions and criminal complaints against the communist Chinese. We can do it without them, believe me. But this is America. Either we have a Justice Department or we don't. And right now we don't. Freedom Watch is your Justice Department, and that's my message. So contact the White House, tell the president to support what we're doing, Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman and you can sign up. We've already got well over 2,000 putative plaintiffs that want to be part of this lawsuit. Support us with tax-deductible contributions. Support us by signing up for the lawsuit. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. This is expensive. We need your help. We need to ramp up. Now I want to talk about what's been going on this week with regard to General Mike Flynn. And we're going to have Dr. Jerome Corsi, my client and friend, on later on in this show, because Dr. Corsi held his ground. He stood his ground. He didn't plead out to perjury when Mueller and his hacks threatened him with what would in effect be life imprisonment, an indictment and a conviction for perjury if he didn't testify against the president. Jerry couldn't do that. He would not collaborate with Mueller, but then again, he wouldn't plead. They were willing to give him a sweetheart plea deal, just plead guilty to one count of perjury, just like General Flynn, and will recommend no jail time, just like General Flynn. Well, General Flynn did the wrong thing. I mean, it was bad judgment. First of all, he hired Covington and Burling, the law firm of former Attorney General Eric Holder, radical leftist, Obama Attorney General, also Deputy Attorney General under Clinton. And Covington Burling is also the home of Lanny Brewer, who was the chief of the criminal division in the Obama Justice Department. It's a Democrat firm. It's sleazy. It's part of the Washington establishment swamp. And the guy that Flynn hired, and I actually had said publicly that he shouldn't do that at the time, was Joseph Kellner, who didn't even have the qualifications to represent him in a criminal case. He's a Federal Election Commission lawyer. He specializes in the Foreign Agents Registration Act. I had recommended that General Flynn get himself a real criminal defense lawyer like my friend Craig Gillen, one of the top criminal defense lawyers in this country. I went to law school with Craig, and get somebody outside of Washington that isn't going to throw him under the bus. Well, General Flynn was thrown under the bus, and you see what happened. Now, what happened was predictable, because you can't go in front of a federal judge, I don't care who appointed him, can't go in front of Judge Sullivan and say under oath that I plead guilty for committing a crime and that I'm sorry about it. That plea was accepted, and the judge was in the process of sentencing General Flynn. Now, granted, the judge is a Clinton appointee. Granted, the judge is left of center. And granted, the judge had taken offense to the fact that General Flynn had signed a $500,000 contract reportedly with the government of Turkey, and the president of Turkey is a radical Islamist. You know, that was not very smart either. I got to tell you, honestly, if you want to be an advisor in the Trump administration, foreign policy advisor in the White House, you know, he shouldn't have done that. But what's happening now with trashing Judge Sullivan is going to be extremely counterproductive. I know Judge Sullivan, frankly, he's a good man. He's the best of the Democrats over there. And I'm going to tell you, he's better than the recent Trump appointees that I've been in front of. Now, he's got a thin skin. He'll react. And that's what he's doing. He's pushing back right now because he's getting trashed on Fox News and in particular, on Hannity. And they're ripping him to shreds. And he's pushing back. He's not going to take it. In the end, he will do the right thing and he will dismiss the criminal prosecution of Flynn. I'm convinced of it. But in the meantime, he's going to put Flynn through the ringer. He's going to torture Flynn because Flynn didn't do the right thing. And he led the judge down the primrose path, with or without Covington and Burling pushing him to do it. Now, Jerry Corsi didn't do that. He held his ground. He wasn't indicted, and he's free and clear. But let me tell you about some of the Trump judges, and I'm going to write a column this week about that. You got Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump judge, who dismissed our case against Google for discrimination against conservatives because he didn't believe what we put in our complaint. He dismissed our case by Ryan Bundy for prosecutorial abuse against the Justice Department, the FBI, and the Bureau of Land Management because he didn't think it was plausible. Then you've got Judge Timothy Kelly over there, who's dismissed lawsuits with regard to InfoWars, Jerry Corsi against Michael Caputo, who's a total hack, friend of Roger Stone, and other innocent victims of the Bundy Ranch standoff. Kelly also didn't find them plausible, and then he messed around for over a year in some cases and let statutes of limitations run and dismissed the cases on the basis that he didn't think venue was in D.C. Well, it did lie in D.C. He just didn't want the cases in his courtroom because they were hot potatoes, because he's a typical establishment Republican hack. And then you have Judge Dabney Friedrich, who got the case that was filed against Fox News and Suzanne Scott by Laurie Loon. Same thing. She didn't buy what was in the complaint. You've got judges down there in Florida, in the Southern District of Florida. Judge Roy Altman dismissed InfoWars cases by Laura Loomer. You got Rodney Smith down there, also a Trump appointee, who sent a case by Laura Loomer against Facebook to San Francisco because he didn't want to handle that. Let me tell you something. These Trump judges were put up to the president by the Republican establishment, not by conservatives, Republican establishment. They are swamp creatures. They got where they got by scratching the backs of those politicians that would put them on the bench. The president doesn't even know who he appointed. And when he says and asks for credit that I had appointed 230 some judges so far that are Trump judges, I got to tell you something. They're not worth a damn, most of them. Maybe I'll find one, but I haven't found one yet because they're afraid of their shadow. They don't have the courage that needs to be done. And I'll tell you something. Judge Sullivan has more courage than all these Trump judges combined. So trashing him right now is the wrong thing to do. And Hannity, you don't know jack about Judge Sullivan. The only thing you know is how to boost viewership and advertising dollars and promising things to your viewers that will never happen. Well, I'm going to be back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We're going to talk more about this because General Mike Flynn's freedom hangs in the balance.
Dangerous.
You don't hear, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Before we put on Dr. Jerome Corsi to talk about General Flynn and what happened and the difference between the way he handled the case with my advice and my co-counsel, David Gray, who's also a very fine lawyer, I want to talk about what's happening with regard to Obama, because he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Barack Hussein Obama got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He was responsible, along with Clapper and Brennan, his intelligence czars, others in the administration, in unmasking the names of people that were subject to surveillance. It was illegal surveillance under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and did so to try to set up General Flynn to get to the president of the United States as Obama was about to leave office. He is, in fact, as the president said correctly, part of one of the biggest scandals in American history. Now, the president simply asked the head of the Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham, to call Obama to testify as to his involvement in this criminal conspiracy. Now, the Judiciary Committee doesn't really have any power to do anything to bring criminal prosecutions. And Lindsey Graham is so afraid of his shadow because he lives in the closet. We'll talk about that in the next segment. And they've got all kinds of stuff on him by the intelligence czars and community, that he basically just goes on Hannity and Fox News and other shows and says, well, I'm going to call people in front of my committee and we're going to get to the bottom of it and heads are going to roll. But nobody knows, everybody knows that heads aren't going to roll with Lindsey Graham. And I'm tired of listening to him. You know, when he comes on, I immediately turn the television off. Of course, I do the same with Hannity because he sells smoke and mirrors. But nobody's going to do the job except Freedom Watch. And it's coming to a critical point, is that we will be indicting Obama for this criminal conspiracy. We will be indicting Clapper and Brennan. We will be indicting the Lovebirds, Page and Strzok. We will be indicting Bruce Orr. We'll be indicting the Clintons. They're all part of a giant criminal enterprise. And the American people have the right in front of a citizens' grand jury to indict. Already we've indicted Robert Mueller, and Dr. Corsi was part of that many months ago. And once the air clears with this coronavirus and we can meet again in groups, we will be indicting all of these other people. So don't depend on our so-called government. Our so-called government, we don't really have a government. It's less than a government. It actually works against us. Thomas Jefferson predicted that would happen someday, and he predicted that we would get into a revolutionary mode, which we are today. I'm trying to deal with it peacefully and legally with citizens' grand juries and other things that we do, such as bringing lawsuits on COVID-19 and criminal complaints in The Hague, Holland. But the fact is, we are in a revolutionary mode because the government no longer represents us. It's perhaps even worse than the government of King George III, leading up to the revolution, which began in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. But when you hear people like Lindsey Graham spew, obviously take it more than with a grain of salt. It's just simply dishonest. And that's why you need to join our Justice League at Freedom Watch, and you need to support our class action, our COVID class action against the communist Chinese and our criminal case in The Hague, Holland, to have the leadership thrown in prison, and our cases that we're starting to file in other countries, such as in Jerusalem, Israel. The Israelis are very resourceful, believe me. They are very aggressive and they move quickly, and they're great partners. They're our best ally, for that matter. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, support our cause. You know, turn off Hannity and Fox News. Frankly, when I watch him, I feel like throwing up because I hear the same monologue every single night. I can't take it for more than a minute. I hear major breaking news. I see the same guests who by and large have never done anything. At the extent they do anything, they get documents and then put them in their desk drawer and ask the government to do the job of the American people. Well, we at Freedom Watch don't ask other people to do our job. We, like our founding fathers, have to do it for ourselves, whatever the risk. And I say what needs to be said. You know, I just was very critical in the first segment about Trump judges. I'm going to appear in front of them, but I've got to tell the truth. And I've also got to tell the truth that Judge Emmett Sullivan is not a villain. And it's a big mistake to make him a villain. Actually, he has some integrity, which I really can't say about most of the other judges in that DC federal courthouse. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause. And I'll be back shortly with Dr. Jerome Corsi, and he'll tell his story, how he stood his ground, how he fought the law, to use the term loosely, and he won. And you need to do the same, because we need to stand up to tyrants. As Thomas Jefferson said, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Dr. Jerome Corsi, my friend, a patriot, a New York Times best-selling author many, many times over, I might add. 2 on the first bestseller list of the New York Times. And I want to have him discuss, because it's an interesting dichotomy. It's a difference between the way we handled the threats of Special Counsel Robert Mueller to indict Jerry if he didn't testify against the president. He asked him to lie. Mueller asked him to lie. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't buckle under his creator, and he held his ground. We ultimately wound up suing Mueller on at least 2 occasions, and we fought the law. Of course, Mueller's not the law, but we won. Jerry was not indicted. Roger Stone was indicted for perjury, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering, and convicted. Jerry did everything right. He told the truth. But the fact is that General Mike Flynn did plead guilty to perjury. He was led down the primrose path by his lawyers at Covington and Burling. He never should have hired them. I warned against that at the time. I actually spoke with Joe Flynn about it, his brother, and I said, don't do that. Because, you see, Covington and Burling is a Democrat law firm. It's a law firm of not just Eric Holder, former Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General before that, but also Lanny Brewer, head of the criminal division under Obama. And they hired this character by the name of Joseph Kilner, who wasn't even qualified to represent Michael Flynn, General Flynn, because he's a Federal Election Commission lawyer and he specializes in the Federal Agents Registration Act. He's not a criminal defense lawyer. So I had actually suggested that the general hire a real criminal defense lawyer outside of the Washington swamp, because the Washington swamp generally will throw you under the bus, and that's what happened. Now, General Flynn's a good man, and I believe that he should not be able to be prosecuted further. He did plead guilty. Judge Sullivan was ready to sentence him. But I want to get Jerry's thoughts, because Jerry stood his ground, so to speak, and won. Jerry, give the listeners your thoughts on what went through your mind and why you didn't do what General Flynn did and why you're not in the fix that he's in right now.
Well, thank you, Larry. And, of course, you were right there in the middle of it with me, Larry, and your advice was essential to all the decisions I made. I thank you for that. My situation was very similar in the sense that I was, after 40 hours of really voluntary interviews with the FBI, they were absolutely convinced I had a contact with Julian Assange that had told me in July and August 2016, when I was on a vacation with my wife and family to Italy. It was our 25th wedding anniversary, and I had been communicating back to Roger Stone and others that the remaining emails that Julian Assange had belonged to Podesta, who was then the campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton. And this was right after July 22nd, of course, was in 2016, was the first emails that Assange had released on Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and revealing that Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee had been conspiring to make sure that Bernie Sanders would not win the nomination in 2016. And the truth is, I just figured out on my own, putting the pieces together, that the next batch of emails would be Podesta's that Assange had, that he was talking about. And Assange was being cryptic. He wouldn't say what they were. And I felt he would release those in October as an October surprise. I had studied Podesta, and I knew what was in the Podesta emails. And the Mueller prosecutors, this was critical to their case because they needed a link between Roger Stone and Julian Assange in order to establish that President Trump, through Roger Stone, had been talking to Assange and conspiring as to when to best release the last set of emails on to hurt Hillary Clinton, last set of stolen emails from the Democratic National Committee. And that I knew or seemed to know they were Podesta's emails meant I had advanced knowledge, which to the prosecutors meant I had to have a source. Told me that. I didn't have a source, and finally the prosecutors were they threatened because they said I was lying to them, in other words, withholding information and misleading them with statements saying I had figured it out myself. They wanted me to plead guilty to one count of lying, and it would have what they gave me as the allocution to stand in front of a judge and swear on a Bible was that I had lied about not having a contact to Assange. Now, they put you under tremendous pressure, and they did to General Flynn, too. They said, prosecutors, especially as Aaron Zelinsky, who continues to hound me, by the way, Larry, but he's still in the Justice Department. That's one of the problems. Barr has not cleaned out the Justice Department of all these Mueller thugs, criminals. But they said they would charge me with obstruction of justice in a Washington, D.C. court where the jury would hate me, and I would lose, and I would be in prison the rest of my life. And, in fact, they would even make it easy for me to plead because also my attorney, David Gray, at that time, who was not licensed to practice in Washington, they said they would get a judge who would make an exception, and David, without me having to pay for David to get registered, would be able to represent me along with Larry. Well, I said no, I wasn't going to do it. But finally, it's tremendous pressure. The family, you feel like you're going to ruin the family. We're going to lose the house. I'll be in prison the rest of my life. And my wife, Monica, woke up. We've been married now going on to 30 years. And she said, I'd rather visit you in prison the rest of your life than have you not be the man I married. And I realized when Monica said that, if that was where she was, because it's a decision, Larry, you can't make for yourself. You have to make it for the family. And I said, okay, I'm going to resist it. I'm not going to plead guilty. And you were advising me at the time, Larry, not to plead guilty. And we defended that. And I went public. I went on the media and told people what had been done to me. I showed them the plea deal that was offered to me. We weren't supposed to do that. The prosecutors thought that would all be secret. And I exposed this attempt to suborn perjury by forcing me to lie in front of a federal judge. And when it came down to it, I could not, my religion is strong, and I could not imagine myself swearing to a crime I didn't commit. I would rehearse it in my mind, and I'd get about halfway through and say, Judge, this is nonsense. I didn't do this. So I just refused. And I was never indicted. They never brought charges, which means they didn't have a case. And I think the case in General Flynn, where he did agree to a plea deal under this kind of pressure, including to investigate and indict his son, I think it's pretty clear that resisting these thug prosecutors is really the only safe strategy, because they would have owned me had I pled guilty, and I would then be considered and would have been a felon pleading to a crime. And I just couldn't do that because I did not commit a crime, and I'm not a felon. Larry?
Of course, the other thing is we don't know, and I like General Flynn and I like his brother Joe, but we don't know what he gave up in terms of collaboration. He had to collaborate with the Mueller prosecutors to be able to get a lesser sentence. They were recommending no jail time at the time, and that was the problem. And then, of course, along came Judge Sullivan, who, I got to tell you, Jerry, of all the Democrat judges in that courthouse, he's probably the best. And frankly, he's better than a lot of the Republican judges. He tends to react to things, but he generally, in the end, will do the right thing. And I think what's happening now is that he's pushing back. He's creating this procedure that's it's rather cumbersome. It's going to be very costly for the general. It's going to create a lot of emotional distress. I think he's in effect torturing the general in a way. It's not funny because of the pushback that's occurring in the media, particularly on Hannity, on Fox News. I mean, they're just ripping the judge to shreds, and I know him well enough. He's not going to take it. And General Flynn is the one who's going to be the loser here if Hannity continues that on his show. Of course, he does that, in my view, to boost ratings and to generate advertising dollars. But I know Judge Sullivan very well. In the end, he will dismiss the case with the plea agreement, but he's going to put Flynn through the ringer right now. And that's sad. It's unfortunate, but it's what's going to happen. On the other side of the coin, I want to get your thoughts, because we have Senator Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who thinks it's beneath him to call Barack Obama before his committee to even testify over the unmasking of General Flynn and the unmasking of many others, including people in and around President Trump, if not President Trump himself, which is illegal. It's a crime. And Lindsey Graham's been shooting his mouth off now for months, probably even a year, since he became the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I got to ask myself, what does the Intelligence Committee have on Lindsey Graham that all he does is talk and go on Fox News? What are your thoughts, Jerry, about calling Obama in front of the committee? Not that that's a be-all and end-all. That won't result in justice. But it should be done to find out what Obama knew and when he knew it. We already know he was in on a conspiracy, basically, to lynch General Michael Flynn and therefore get to the president.
Well, first of all, I think that President Obama is traitor in chief, and it was the chief of this coup d'etat plot. And in fact, I think Obama committed more crimes this past week when he leaked a speech he gave when he was saying that Judge Sullivan should begin an investigation for perjury for General Flynn. That was leaked to General Sullivan. And to Judge Sullivan, rather. Judge Sullivan, I think, heard that, and Obama was recorded doing that. And I think the key to understanding Lindsey Graham is Lindsey Graham was a close friend of John McCain. They were buddies. They did not like Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham is complicit in going to Syria with McCain and supporting the rise of ISIS. I've written about that and can document it. And I think the problem with Lindsey Graham is that he knows that Obama and the White House brought him into certain meetings and made him part of the knowledge that this conspiracy against General Flynn and others was going on. And I believe Lindsey Graham is also taped. What I'm hearing through the scuttlebutt is that McCabe was taping Comey and taping Brennan and everybody. They were all taping each other because if any one of them were to be indicted, McCabe to be indicted, he was going to bring everybody else down. And I think Lindsey Graham knows that he was co-opted into the conspiracy against Donald Trump, and he's trying to have that not be revealed. And I believe that's what Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, and of course it was his best friend McCain who turned over the Steele dossier to the FBI.
That's correct, and also McCain did any number of things. McCain cast the deciding vote any number of times when Donald Trump was trying to get things through the Senate, and McCain, I think, was also a very angry, very anti-American. I think back to when he was in Vietnam, he turned and was working for the Vietnamese, and the POWs would protect him because he didn't leave Vietnam until they all left Vietnam. But I think McCain has been a traitor to the United States for decades, and Lindsey Graham was his best buddy. And I believe Barack Obama played the two of them like a fiddle. And then Lindsey Graham, I think, is afraid that if he brings in Barack Obama, first thing Barack Obama is going to do is play some tapes when Lindsey Graham is in the room and see what everybody thinks about those.
Yeah, and let's be candid here. I mean, neither you nor I are homophobic, Jerry, but there have been strong rumors for many years that Lindsey Graham is gay. Of his generation, he doesn't want that out. And in fact, the gay community outed him during the Kavanaugh hearings. I think that's part of it, is that, he doesn't want to be smeared. He's got a very thin skin. And, frankly, I just have to turn him off when I see him on Fox News anymore, particularly on Hannity. I don't want to hear that BS anymore. It gets under my skin. And you can't be promising the American people things that you're never going to do. And that's the problem.
I met Lindsey Graham, including at Fox one day, and he's not a particularly nice guy. He's very self-centered, very short, very mean, and he was really. I think the public opinion of Lindsey Graham when he comes on Hannity is a lot of talk and no action. I don't see a lot of action from Lindsey Graham. We'll see what he does this time, but he will not expose himself, and that's, I think, the problem that Lindsey Graham has had from the beginning.
Well, and Jerry, you remember that you were instrumental in our having Special Counsel Robert Mueller indicted in our citizens' grand jury. We will do the job. Lindsey Graham will not. That's a promise. Jerry, thank you for coming on. God bless you. You're a true patriot and a courageous man and my friend.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
You heard what I had to say about the president. I love the president. Personally, I support him. I don't tell people who to vote for as the head of Freedom Watch. But I got to be critical when you need to be critical. I'm just not a cheerleader. I'm not Tokyo Rose during World War II, like Sean Hannity on Fox News and others. I got to tell it as I see it, even if I offend some of the people who don't truly understand what's going on. The president needs to direct his attorney general to support Freedom Watch in our class action lawsuits against the communist Chinese. I urge you to contact the White House and let it be known to instruct Barr, this worthless attorney general, to support our case. Now, I don't need him to prevail, but it would certainly be the right thing to do. And he also should be bringing criminal prosecutions against the communist Chinese. They certainly have affected in a major way. They're destroying our lives as we speak. There is jurisdiction in this country to do it. This was a bioweapon. The intel community knows that. They won't reveal that because we may have given the seeds for the Chinese to manufacture one from our military laboratory at Fort Detrick, Maryland. But that's what it is. And there needs to be a criminal prosecution. But we have already done that at Freedom Watch. We filed a complaint at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Holland, and we're confident that they will start one. And then with regard to people like Obama and the intelligence czars, the dishonest John Brennan, former CIA director, and Clapper, director of national intelligence, James Clapper, all these people, they need to be indicted, tried, convicted, arrested, and the key thrown away. And we, with Freedom Watch's citizens' grand juries, will be doing that as well as taking care of the Clintons, believe me, peacefully and legally. We are at a crossroads. We are at a time when the American people need to rise up, do it for themselves. We've been sold out for our government, by our government. Ask yourself this question. What president, Democrat or Republican, in the last 20-some years and beyond that, prepared for a pandemic like COVID-19? We were caught flat-footed. They did nothing. They just sat there. They pontificated. They bragged about how they've accomplished great things. But in fact, they threw the American people under the bus. And that accounts for all of them, every single one, Democrat and Republican. Let's call a spade a spade. You know, what goes on in Washington is a money orgy and a power orgy and a mutual assured destruction, people destroying people, investigations that go nowhere, no intent on prosecuting. Investigations are fine, but they never prosecute because all they want to do, these politicians, is get on cable news, whether it's Fox, MSNBC, CNN. It helps them raise money, get reelected. Then they make more money. Many of them take bribes. Many of them, you know, have affairs every place that you can find. They're not doing their job. And what do we have? We have a situation where the nation is being destroyed when it was totally foreseeable, particularly after 9/11, that someday there would be a biological attack on the United States and the world. So a pox on all their houses. Frankly, if I had to write another book, I would write it. The title would be, I Hate Everyone. Okay, I'm not kidding. Okay, anybody in government today, I don't care who it is, isn't worth you know what. And that's why you need to support Freedom Watch, because we, the people, rise up peacefully and legally. We do what needs to be done. We are trying to do it peacefully and legally, and the citizens' grand juries give us the right to do that. Justice Scalia back in 1982 ruled that the grand jury belongs to the American people, not the three branches of government. And I'm hopeful that we get a judge in Dallas, Texas, that will allow the case to proceed. I believe that we will. It's in the interest of everybody, and that we get justice there, and that the criminal court in The Hague, Holland moves forward as well. We want to do it peacefully and legally. And I'm trying to let the steam out of the pressure that's building in this country, that if it's not let out peacefully and legally, will turn violent. And you'll have people at the front door of your house wanting to take everything that you own, because we'll be living in more than a Great Depression. God bless you. God bless your family. God save your family. God bless the United States, and God save the United States. And I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, share this radio show with everyone. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org, on iTunes, Spotify, Roku, Amazon Fire, Facebook, Twitter. Share it wide and far, because at Radio America, you get the truth. Thank you for listening to me.